Hi, welcome back to Save It for Parts. Today we've got something a little bit different than the last few videos. Now I haven't quite run out of boats, but I've decided to switch gears a little bit and go with something that flies. Is the world ready for the Save It for Parts space program? Heck, I don't know if I'm ready for a space program, but let's look around the garage and see what we have that we can make into a rocket. Now I have some of these model rockets already, but I'm thinking I'd like to go a little bit bigger this time. I've got some cardboard tubes, some bigger cardboard tubes. Wait, no, that's another project. Well, let's see. This could be a nose cone. Well, that kind of looks like a Mercury or a Gemini capsule. I've got a couple things that could be a rocket body and a nose cone, and now I need some fins on the end. Now, where have I seen something that looks like rocket fins? Alright, I was able to find a used washing machine agitator so that I don't actually have to disassemble my washing machine. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off the bottom of that agitator, cut off that big wide round part, and that's kind of a boring sequence to show. So I'm just going to do a little movie magic and cut to the part where it's all ready to be rocket fins. So let's see how well all this junk goes together. I glued one of the end caps from that poster tube onto the bottom of my plastic Gemini beaker, and I'm going to screw another little beaker thing onto the top here to make kind of a final nose cone or kind of an escape tower. Perfect fit. You may be surprised to hear that a lot of my projects are just me digging around my garage for things that fit onto other things, and when you have this much junk in the garage, you're eventually going to find it. When I was a kid, I lived on an island in Alaska, and so my front yard was the ocean, and my backyard was the forest, which is not a great environment to launch model rockets. And the best you could hope for was at low tide, you'd have a field of rocks. And so I didn't have a lot of rockets that survived more than one or two flights. Even if they landed on the beach, the fins would usually smash off, and sometimes other disasters would happen to them. I did go to space camp, and we launched a large rocket at space camp that the entire team put together. That one exploded on the pad, so I would have to say that my experience with model rockets does not always end in them going up and coming down safely and in one piece. I think this looks pretty close to a rocket, and now we just need to find a way to make this fly. This is a marine parachute flare, and these are used for distress signaling on a boat. When you're out at sea, if you are broken down or sinking and you need to signal for help, it shoots a rocket about 1,000 feet up and deploys a parachute with a glowing red ball on it. And this is the actual rocket or flare that fires up in the air. You can see it's got a little nose cone, it's got these kind of molded in fins, and it's got the jet nozzle where the rocket exhaust comes out. The rest of this unit is the firing mechanism, which you release by pulling this little cap off and then firing a little trigger inside. Okay, here comes the safety talk. I don't actually recommend taking these apart in the comfort of your own garage. I've taken them apart before, I still have most of my fingers, I haven't blown up yet, but if you manage to trigger one of these, it is going to be a flaming ball of fire bouncing all over your workspace and then ejecting a glowing ball of magnesium. And your little fire extinguisher probably won't help with that because they do not want to go out. And I have seen these things burning underwater. So I don't recommend actually doing this at home. So we have a couple parts inside these parachute flares. We have the parachute. It's small for what I want, but maybe I can use it as a drogue chute for the larger parachute. We have the part that I'm interested in, which is the rocket motor. And it's only about this much of the actual assembly. So I could trim off some more of this plastic if I wanted to save weight. And then this is the payload, or the actual flare, that's essentially a cylinder of magnesium that's going to be burning at the end of the parachute and theoretically saving you when your ship is going down. So we're going to go ahead and set this aside for July 4th or whatever and concentrate on getting the motor into our rocket body. Now I've got some wood corner trim around here somewhere, which I think I can use as a shim to hold that motor in place. So I found some wood corner trim, and I cut it into some smaller pieces so that I can wedge it up inside here and hold this rocket motor within the larger diameter of the washing machine part. Alright, I'm going to say that engine is pretty well centered in there. The engine that came with the parachute flare already has an ejection charge in it, and that will push the parachute up out of the rocket, pop the nose cone off, hopefully in the same way that a regular model rocket does. Now this parachute might seem a little small, but I basically just want to slow this down so that it's less of a lawn dart and so that it's landing on these fins, which are actually the strongest part of this rocket. The cardboard would crumple. This little nose cone would probably survive, but if I landed on the top, I'd probably wreck it. This is actually the most rigid and solid part of the rocket. Those model rockets, which I had as a kid, which if you even looked at the fins funny on the model rockets, they would just shatter because they were balsa wood. But this is pretty rigid plastic. I think it can handle me just smashing it into the ground even without a parachute. Alright, so we've packed the parachutes inside, and I have a little wad of non-flammable material at the bottom, which keeps the parachutes from just melting when that ejection charge goes off. So next we need some sort of a launch pad for this rocket. So I've got a bunch of extra half-inch PVC pipe and conduit kicking around, and a whole bunch of half-inch connectors that are left over from other projects. Not necessarily even plumbing projects. I treat these like Tinker Toys. I make everything out of this. And then we're going to need an ignition system to set off this rocket motor. And this looks like a safety switch. Here's a big red button. And here's an enclosure that I can use to make a control panel. This is made out of really thin stuff, and they gave me exactly 3 out of the 4 screws that it's supposed to come with. Alright, so I've got 9 volts coming out of my little igniter box when I push the big red button. I need a new bulb in my little indicator light, but otherwise it seems like all this stuff works. So next I need some longer wires on here with some alligator clips on the end to connect to the rocket. And I might give the rocket a quick paint job just so it's a little easier to see. So I realized that my current house is not all that much better for launching rockets because there are a lot of roads and neighbors and other city things that probably don't appreciate having a rocket fall on them. So I need to go out to a countryside location where there's a little more of a field. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Alright, now let's try a fuse then. Backup ignition! Uh-oh, here goes! Heads up! Oop.
That went a lot higher than I thought.
Well, there's the nose cone. Alright, well that didn't go 100% as planned. We lost part of a fin, the motor melted, the capsule completely detached from the parachute. Actually, the cardboard tube took the least damage. So I might be able to rebuild this with some glue and duct tape for another round. Well, my rocket did fly. Unfortunately, it didn't fly quite as high or as straight as I was hoping. You saw in the video how it pitched over and basically flew itself into the nearest tree. And I must have had something either off balance or bent or otherwise screwed up, so it basically just flew itself in a parabola and came back down into the tree. So my ejection system never really had a chance. So I did also have this little onboard camera. This is just a really cheap keychain camera. And let's see if it got any footage of the launch. You also noticed that I had a problem with my ignition system. Now I did test this system with an actual igniter prior to going out to the range, and it did fire the igniter that I used to test. However, it didn't fire the igniter in the field when I wanted it to. And I think that that particular igniter was just a dud or too old to go off. Fortunately, I had some rocket cannon fuse handy, and we were able to kind of jury-rig things. So that's all for this particular video. Thank you for watching, and feel free to like and subscribe if you want to see more things like this, or check out some of my other videos for similar projects and other Save It for Parts ideas.